Let's get rolling. All right, big shout out to all the sponsors. I want to thank Kenzies Optics. I want to thank Riton Optics. I want to thank Crossbreed Holsters. And, of course, Taurus. Please check them out. Give them a visit. Remember to like and subscribe. Please join me on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Join me on iTunes or any other of the platforms listed on www.johnbartoloshow.com or Podbean. Podbean's always a good one if you don't have access to any of the social media, any of the Apple products, sorry. If you get a chance and you are available on Instagram, we stream our questions from there. That's the format, and today hopefully we'll have a couple of guests on. We're going to get into a topic that comes up a lot, an awful lot. We're going to get into sponsorship. So this comes up all the time. Frenny, I wanted to congratulate you. I saw you competed. I was going to call you. I didn't want to bug you while you were in the middle of competing. But I might need you for this, Frenny. So we're going to get into a topic, and I streamed the topic sponsorship. I'm trying to answer questions as I get them. I get a ton of questions from people. So I did a whole podcast, and I did a whole YouTube on particularly on starting a YouTube/podcast, kind of a successful YouTube/podcast. The other question I get the most is on sponsorship and answering questions about sponsorship. I get like inundated and slammed with these questions. So I want to answer them both from a company perspective and from an individual perspective. I just get too many of them to answer them a la carte, so I'll do a standalone episode that deals with it right now. I want to start... oh, dude, who cares if you didn't medal? Who fucking cares? That's awesome that you did it, first of all. I want to get into people's perception of sponsorship because I think it's important to tackle it from the outside in, and that's where maybe Frenny, you can chime in if you have time and talk about what you see being someone who's kind of peeked behind the curtain a little bit and what you maybe thought of sponsorship before and after. And that's something I want to really get into and dissect little by little with some of you guys while I take some questions from you guys about it. Because I think there's a definite misconception as to what sponsorship is and what's involved in sponsorship. Yeah, I mean, jump in anytime. So we can kick it off with Frenny kind of giving his input if he's up to it, because I think he's perfect for this, and I'm glad he's on. What's up, bro?
Hey, sorry, I'm driving right now, so...
No, it's going to only take 10 minutes. I think you're perfect for this segment because you've seen just enough behind the curtain, and you've moved and sat and ate and spent time with all of us. So yep. I just want you to give kind of your 5-8 minute answer on what the perception of sponsorship was before you met and spent time with all of us and became friends with us, and what your perception of that is now, so I can kind of back into answering people's questions about how to become sponsored and all that bullshit in between.
All right, so, like, my perspective going into it was, you know, you apply for, like, whatever, for a sponsorship, like either a supplement company or, you know, like,
whatever
fits the mold. It's that, you know, maybe you'll get like some sort of kickback or some sort of service provided to you as long as you know, make a post about it or whatever. Now, like, seeing how much actual work it is, it's almost like a full-time job. You have to like think of, you know, your types of engagements, your posts about the product, and sometimes the companies will make it so that if you have a contract, that you have to post X amount of times during a week saying X, Y, and Z about that product. So you kind of lose a lot of your platform, you know, to a point where it's like, is this even mine anymore? You know, like who am I doing it? Am I myself? Am I doing it for them? So it's like another way of like your platform to do that. And you gotta like wonder, like, is this something I believe in? Is this product like really something I can actually get behind? That's something you need to establish, like, first. They need to trust the product. You are an actual consumer of the product first before you even like get your name behind it. Because I feel like you need to be a customer for at least a year before you think even being sponsored by it. And then you got to realize that, like, what you post, the content you're going to put out is going to change when you get that sponsorship.
So you touched on a couple things that I want to kind of you to dive into. When you got to meet us and you got to know us, you kind of realized how much work it really was and what's really involved, and you've kind of seen like the inner workings of some different ambassador programs. With that being said, you see all the directions we're pulled in and all the different things involved. What is kind of like what was the biggest eye opener after getting a peek behind the curtain to you as someone who was just a friend, not I don't mean to say just a friend, but a guy on the outside just kind of watching, to then getting to travel around with us, peek behind the curtain and see some of it and see some of the production of it is probably the best way for me to put it. What was kind of like your biggest takeaway? Like, wow, I didn't realize this is a fucking full-time job. Was it that, or was it like, did it just look all like fun and glamorous, or what was kind of the biggest thing you kind of went home and you were like, holy shit?
It was definitely a little bit of both, I'd say. You know what I mean? The fact that it was a full-time job, and the fact that, like, Tony takes his content very seriously. I don't think a lot of people like really realize that. Like when he had, like when we were down there for that 3 days of training down in Florida, like to have somebody come out for those 3 days to fly a drone, to take all the media, whether it's video, pictures, whatever. It was pretty big, and I think that everything that was shot during the day, and it's only condensed for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and he's still got to pay that guy for all those 3 days.
It's a business. It's absolutely a business.
Yeah, and it's like, so that is a cost that's going to come right out of his own pocket. So he's probably paying him ballpark probably $1,000 a day, at least just to be down there. And for that 3 days, that was free for law enforcement.
Yep.
So that's coming out of Tony's own pocket. Whatever that cost of having him come down there. So it was really impressive. In fact, he had all that the media stuff there, and that guy with the drones. Got some great shots. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a huge it's a job, and it's work in and of itself, and it's not something that just kind of happens, like it's whipped together. And I kind of just wanted to get your kind of commentary on it really fast and get your input. I know you're driving. Congratulations on competing. Just competing is a good thing, brother. I saw that and I thought that was fucking awesome. You laid it out perfectly. You were like, I just jumped into it a day before, like, fuck it. I mean, who gives a shit about medals and stuff like that? Like, honestly, you're just getting out there and you're just competing. And it's probably, honestly, the best thing, because it shows you how fucked up you are and how you got to get like to that next level, or what you got to do. Like, it gives you a great barometer from the beginning, because you don't know how far off you are or how close you are. People walk around like, oh, I can compete. I could just jump in and do that. And then you can just say, no, I did it last week. I tried to jump in, got my ass kicked. And that's what we all do. I mean, I deal with it. I get beat up by my girlfriend every day. So it's perfect. You know what I mean? It's like, that's kind of the thing, so I think that's bravo to you, and that's a huge humbling thing, and it speaks to your character and who you are. And when you came out and trained, you just jumped in every drill, and right away you were like a first flight guy, and that's just awesome. I mean, I think you have to just sometimes say, my motto is the Tom Brady motto, which is like, just go out there and sling it. You just got to go out there sometimes and say fuck it, and that's what I've always done, and I don't care. So that's how I operate. But I think that's awesome. I think that's good points. I'll give you the last word on kind of any advice you might give somebody kind of seeking sponsorship as a guy who's been out there training a little bit. Maybe your top one or two things or takeaways, and then I'll get into my topics.
So I guess like my pet peeve is that, and I see a lot of people doing it, is kind of what gets thrown around is like being like a homie hopper.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like they jump from sponsorship, supplement companies to products or whatever, and they keep on like jumping back and forth. It's like your reputation and your name is huge,
right?
Know? And if you don't develop some sort of brand loyalty, and if you're just willing to go to whoever's the highest bidder, it's kind of like I don't know, to me that just doesn't look good. I feel like I'm old fashioned in that sense. But
maybe. I don't think you're old-fashioned in that sense. I think we're all aware of that, but I think we're also, and this is a topic I'll get into, I think we're all also aware that there's a business component to it, and there's a component of making the right business deal, and not every athlete or everybody's fortunate. Like, I was really fortunate that I got to work with Gasp and Blackstone for as many years as I did. And I'm a guy who's kind of at the tail end a little bit of my career with some of that stuff, because I'm not 25 anymore. I can't get out there, and that's just not in my makeup. So whether or not, you stay with those brands or not with those brands, people don't realize sometimes that there's more back-end components to working out the right deal behind the scenes to those deals. It doesn't make it by no means condones jumping from brand to brand to brand. We all hope we go everywhere and have these 3 to 5 year careers at minimum with some of these brands we work with. To me, that's an acceptable minimum. You should stay with a brand 3 to 5 years and work with them. And then if it becomes a point where you go your separate ways or the marketing goes a separate way, then you can't stay with them. It's just, that's the reality. You have to go to a different place. Not every brand is designed to market the best way for you. Does that mean you become what we call like a brand hoe and you jump around 9 different brands? Of course not. Nobody wants that. But if you can look back on a 20-year career, which is a fair snapshot, and you were maybe with 3 departments or less, I'd say that's a pretty good career. If you can say you were 2 or less, that's phenomenal. That's ideal. Being with 1 today in this day and age, and that is an old-fashioned thought process, is very hard, because you're always looking to upgrade. I mean, you can't say if, you don't have a dream scenario of where you want to be, and everybody sets goals, and you and I have talked about this in the past, and sometimes, the marketing changes and the direction changes, and you're not with that direction, so it all makes sense. You're not wrong. I would say my thinking has been skewed to, if you can stay with 3 brands over a 20-year period in one market segment, you're winning. 3 or under. If you're over 3, you run the risk of being a little bit of a hopper. But you look at a guy like Mike O'Hearn, who's had a fucking 40-year career in fitness. I can't tell you how many clothing brands, how many supplement brands he's been with, and it's never really affected him. But he's had such a long body of work that, he's going to jump around, And I know he's not cheap.
His resume speaks for himself.
Yep.
I mean,
he has a lot of reach. He's got a lot of, when he talks about something, he's a good spokesperson for that brand. So of course he's gonna up around. But we'll get into the different roles people play. I'll let you go. I'm gonna get into all those topics and kind of dissect them one by one for everybody. I'll let you go. Congratulations on competing, and thanks for the input.
Thanks, man.
Later. Talk to you later. So there you go. So Dan, to give you some insight into Dan's a guy who's friends with some of us. He's gotten a peek behind the curtain a little bit with some things. So he kind of gets it a little bit. He gets it more and more every time he's around. And he understands it, and I think his remarks are spot on. And I want to give people some insight into what somebody who spent some time with us kind of maybe had a preconceived notion of sponsorship and things like that. And I'll take questions as you guys have them. So I want to break down a couple things, okay? First, it's how do you become sponsored? Like, what's this like? it's like a dirty word in the business. It's like this mythical, like, I'm sponsored. Like, what does sponsorship mean? To me, being a guy who's run sponsorship programs for multiple brands, been involved with multiple brands, to me, and I did a talk on this at Gasp at one point, to me, sponsorship means you're paid. There's people who get free product, there's ambassadors, and then there's legitimate sponsored athletes. To me, sponsorship means you're paid. You're paid to endorse a product. Now, there's people out there that call those people shills. They call them this, they call them that. Dan hit it on the head. That's not entirely true because I know how Tony operates, how I operate in the past, how branches operate. We try everything over a period of time that we're considering sponsorship or considering working out with, and I can guarantee you more stuff ends up in the scrap heap that we wouldn't touch or work a deal out because we just don't feel it. It just isn't there, or the product isn't there. Now, with that being said, what does that mean? And if you guys get a chance, head over to YouTube, tap thumbs up, give it a share. I appreciate it. Now, what does that mean? How do you arrive to that point where you're able to look at companies or, excuse me, sneeze, sorry, apologize. How do you get to that point where you're actually in a position to be sponsored? Well, there's a number of ways. There's companies right now, we've never been in a bigger time. Everybody's an ambassador for something. I always joke, everybody's sponsored, but not everybody's paid. So there's a million avenues to go down. There's a million roads to travel down. What you decide is best for you can work out a number of different ways. Now, there's great stories out there. I'm familiar with a few of them. I'm not, intimately familiar with them, but I know them. You take a Jenna Fail at First Form. She's done a phenomenal job rising through the ranks. A Mikey Coonahan. You look at that First Form model, it's built a lot of people from that ground up, from that bottom up. And it's given a lot of law enforcement, military, folks, and even folks just diehard fitness gurus a chance to rise up from a sales role and earn those people have earned that every step of the way. And that's a phenomenal model. So, in talking sponsorship and answering questions about how to quote unquote be sponsored, how does that model work, or do you fit into that model? That's the first question you have to ask yourself is do you fit in that model? Because a lot of people want to fit a square peg in a round hole. And that doesn't always work. When I ran sponsorship programs, I tried to only bring on one or two marquee names. That wasn't always the case, and that wasn't always a fit for every brand, but I only wanted to bring on a couple of marquee brand names because when you work with somebody, you want to work with them as best that you can to give them the best chance to flourish. I had been on both sides of the table, so I knew what it took. I didn't want to have 20 people out there that I couldn't service them and deliver the marketing behind them that I felt supported them on both sides of the aisle, because I feel that that's incredibly important as a brand to support it from both sides of the aisle. So when you're sitting down or you're evaluating companies, you have to decide, do I fit in that model? Does that model make sense for me, or am I fitting a square peg into a round hole? When I signed my deal with Gasp, I was not going to be a good fit for Gymshark. It was not what was going to be a good fit for me. I was not going to be a good fit for certain brands. They did not make sense for me at that time. I was coming out of a powerlifting background, transitioning to bodybuilding. That brand made sense for me. Okay? Fitting into that, I didn't have to fit into that mold. It was like walk in and be you. So how you fit into a sponsorship role and how you become sponsored, I receive so many questions on this. I get so inundated with it. And I always put it back on the people, and they don't like that. I say, do you fit that brand? And they're like, but I love, First Form, or I love this, or I love that, or I love that candy bar from Quest. But do you fit that mold? Just because you got free candy bars from Quest doesn't mean you're sponsored by Quest. It's, do you fit into their marketing? Do you fit into their brand? And are you working with them on an ongoing basis? Now, behind the scenes in the firearms business, I was working with many brands, not just on sponsorship, but the development of the brand, how the brand was being rolled out. And I never fancied myself as an A player in that world. I was more providing a lot behind the scenes, and I just so happened to have to jump in front of the camera from time to time and do some stuff. But if you want to be sponsored, first, find out if you fit the model of the company. And don't try to fit a square peg into a round hole. That's not going to work. So find the model that fits you. I don't have the answer to that. Only you do. Like, you see people want to jump on bandwagons and they all want to be sponsored by one particular brand. That's the dream for companies, because then they get to cherry pick whoever they want. Now, when you find the model that fits you, you have to take a long look at their marketing. And you have to take a long look at the direction. And to Dan's point, you're going to have to do things that create a marketing presence that fits. You should already be pretty close, whether that's posting or crafting your posts, because not every company is going to want you out there dropping F-bombs or doing this or doing that. If they're clean marketers or they do clean marketing, you're going to have to market yourself clean. If you're doing these posts that the photo quality is just terrible and it's not there and the company uses premium photos, you better up your premium posts. You better get premium quick, and you better get good quick. So you have to think about that. Do I have the posting chops? Am I posting strong posts? If you're not, you have to think that through. And you have to figure out a way to back into that. So think that through. If you're trying to work with a company and you're not in talks with them, or you're not at least talking to the marketing director, you should be asking 3 key questions. What are you looking for in somebody that's an ambassador or a sponsored athlete? So what are you looking for? And by what are you looking for, I mean, what are they lacking? Things like that. Always ask them, what's the marketing plan? What's the direction you guys are going? And they may say, hey, we're trying to attract power lifters. Hey, we're trying to attract this. Because you may try to come in and they may be going in another direction. So, PJ and I talked all the time. Yes, we still talk. We've been friends for years. So you have to figure out if you fit the direction they're going in, not just the right now, the direction. Secondly, you have to also ask yourself, how much of an investment am I willing to make in this? Because if you think you're not going to spend some of your own money or some of your own time equity, and you might not be dollars out of your pocket, but your time has a value too. So you put what we call sweat equity or time equity into things. You're going to put time equity into it. How much are you willing to put in? An hour a day? 2 hours a day? 3 hours a day? You have to think about that. Now, thirdly, the most common question to ask the folks, and you have to ask them this in the right way. You have to say, do you have a program? Do you have a program, and do you think I fit in it? And get an honest assessment from them. They may say, you're absolutely not the material we're looking for. They'll appreciate you asking for that. Carly says, can make more money, can't make more time. How much are you willing to invest? It's always a question. So, hey, Cassie. So it's always the question. So we're answering questions about sponsorship, and we're trying to tackle the question of sponsorship. And I'm trying to answer questions that I get in my DMs all the time. So we went over the 3 questions to ask companies and how to approach it. So the next thing is, and we're kind of picking on fitness and shooting and different things because those are areas of my expertise. But it goes the same for Nike or Under Armour or anywhere, all the way up the food chain, is competing something that's a priority. And you have to ask yourself, competing on any level, is that important? Does that fit in? Other than very, very, very beginning of me shooting some local nonsense, have I ever competed? I've never really competed. And I never competed in a bodybuilding show, but I competed in powerlifting. And that was something that I had toyed around with, and I still toy around with. So competing is something that you might have to be aware of. Now, after you figure out, and let's say you do your interview process with companies, and you look at companies and you see what's a fit and what maybe makes sense regarding sponsorship, and let's say you find a target. You find a target. Let's say, we'll pick on a company. Let's say it's Enforce Weapon Lights, just to pick one out of a hat. And because I was involved in their marketing and branding, they're easy to pick on. Enforce is essentially a gun porn page. They post mostly guns, not a lot of people. Yes, I believe it still stands at under 240 Caldy. It's on EPF's website. I believe that still stands as a recognized record, if I recall. So, Enforce Weapon Lights is essentially a gun porn page. So, essentially, who are they targeting? Mainly photographers and content creators. And they're looking for pictures of lights and quality pictures that showcase the product of a light. You may not want to be in the business of marketing a light. And that's a real reality. We can pick on gargoyles, sunglasses. What are you going to use for sunglasses? And do you stand by those sunglasses? I've worked with gargoyles for years. They're a great product. I love them. Not every picture is going to be with a gun. They're a pretty mainstream product, sunglasses. So you have to think in terms of that. I worked with mechanics gloves for years. Mechanics is another one. It's not always gun-centric. So all of these things you have to think through. And when you find your target, you have to talk to the companies and potentially get to a point where you understand what they're looking for. And you start to cater your marketing towards that and work into that. Now, nobody, to what Dan was getting to, nobody wants to compromise the integrity of what they are or who they are for a product. You don't want to become a shill. Nobody does. So you use products you stand by. The products I choose, I've used for years. Crossbreed Holsters was probably the first belt I ever bought. Shooting belt. I loved it. I had one of their prototype belts when they first launched. That belt could survive a nuclear blast. Loved it. Loved the belt. Used it for years. Bought it. Truly had shopped at Kenzies way back when. I bought my first optic from them, I believe, at a show. So I always loved them. So companies, when you're choosing them, you better have been a customer first, so you understand the brand a little bit. Now, as you get into, becoming, quote unquote sponsored, how do you get to the point where you're paid and endorsing and getting to that point? Now, that's where it gets tricky, and that's where I could spend an hour on this. There's a number of factors companies look for, and it's not always following. Following is not always the answer. It's not. So to those of you that think following is the be-it end-all, following is not the be-it end-all. You don't necessarily have to have like this giant following. Do you have to have a foothold in the industry? Do I suggest 5, 10, 15,000 followers, a nice reach, or a nice market segment, whether it be law enforcement, MMA, whatever it is? Sure. Absolutely, it helps. And do you have to have some level of reach into that industry? Absolutely. But if you can demonstrate that reach and you can demonstrate it on a successful level, companies will pay attention. They'll look. Don't be afraid to have a one-page sheet that you can send companies that shows some of your reach into those industries or some of your reach into those businesses. I've worked with car companies. I've worked with, my car was done by Truck Vault. I've worked with different companies. You have to figure out how you fit into that. And the supreme level of sponsorship, the ideal space everybody wants to get to, is you want to get to a point where you're not only paid to endorse the product, or you're having the product in your hands, so to speak, to endorse, but you're also at a point where they're doing a lot of the media. A lot of the companies I deal with now, they do a lot of the media. I go out to them, I'll drive out to them, or I'll go see them. They'll, like Truck Vault outfit in my car, and they'll cut a lot of the media in-house. So you want to get to a point where it's not on you in a cell phone. And you have to work out these agreements. And you have to demonstrate yourself as a strong spokesperson, strong personality, somebody who garners that level of respect. And that's earned over time by working closely with a lot of these brands and having these conversations. It's not overnight. I think it was somebody, I saw it, I want to say on Wiseman Company's post, but I saw it on someone's post where they showed all the free gear on somebody. And it's just like anything else. It's just like, I was talking to Heath Evans, who was a former fullback in the NFL, about this. People don't realize they see you with a free whatever it is, a free pen. And they don't realize that that pen represents 8 years of work or 10 years of work to get to that point where that pen was free. It doesn't happen overnight. You're going to have to build a image, a brand, and you're going to have to hold yourself accountable to that image and that brand. So hopefully I'm giving you guys some points, whether it's for the podcast or for your own, development and where you want to be. But it's not going to happen overnight. And to Bruce Cardenas' point that he always likes to bring up, you're going to have to show value. I don't necessarily agree with companies when they get into this whole ROI. They get into this ROI conversation. And when they get into it, it's almost like they disregard the work that, this is where I'll always be an advocate for the athletes. It's almost as if they disregard all the work that's put in. And I used to say this to companies. I used to say, well, Mr. Company, if you think there's no ROI, then why don't you buy the ammo, you go to the range, you set up the cameras, and you do all the work. And then they sit back in their chair. And I'd say at some point you have to account for renting the range, like Tony says, getting the ammo, getting the products, getting the cross promotion in there, tying it all in together. You're just going to throw that out like that doesn't mean anything, and all that matters is how many clicks you get. That's like going up to Phil Heath or one of these Mr. Olympia type guys and saying, all the championships you won don't matter. How you look doesn't matter. Because all those things matter. You have to factor all of those things in. And you have to educate sometimes some of these companies. And to an extent, many of the brands it doesn't click with them. You have to lay it out to them. Here's what the deliverables are. That's where you have to bring the conversation. Here's what you're going to do for me, but here's what I'm going to deliver. I'm going to deliver this, 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 and this. And I'm going to deliver all of these things based on the agreement that we form. Whether that's for free product, whether that's for money, whether that's for this or that's for that. So you have to lay out all these things. So you have to be aware of all these things when you're having these conversations with companies. I think I'll add a little bit of this commentary. I think, what's up, Scotty? I think it's sad when people bag on people for being sponsored or attempting sponsorship or getting sponsored. And we also live in a mentality of, you have what I want, so I'm going to in some way hurt you or try to take it from you or, take away your shine. And we see that a lot. And I will tell you, nothing good comes from drama or creating the drama, and companies don't want that. So just let it be. Look at it as free air cover. But you're going to have friends or people around you that will mock it or whatever it is. You got to kind of blinders. So here's my next point, and I don't want this to go long. I'll take a few questions. I'll answer a few questions. I'm trying to answer all the questions that I get regarding sponsorship. People say, well then, John, I'm just getting started. Where do I begin? You have to begin with quality. Whatever it is, like I don't have anyone sponsoring me, like where do I begin? Like where does the light switch go off? Start with marketing yourself. Start with marketing yourself in the most professional, adult manner possible. Start there. That's going to be ideal. Start there. So start there. If you start there and you proliferate and you build your own brand up, even to a minimal degree, people will pay attention. It's going to start with maybe your family paying attention, then your friends. Then it's going to go beyond, and it'll go beyond, and it'll go beyond, and it'll go beyond. I've been fortunate. I've been on multiple podcasts. I've been on multiple different, worked with multiple companies, different spheres of influence over the years, and it's taken years. I think anybody can do that. It's going to take time and commitment. And it certainly was not an overnight thing. And it certainly will not be overnight for anybody. And you have to find the platform that works best for you. And for some people, that platform is Instagram, and for some people, that platform is YouTube. I don't have the answer to what platform suits you best. You have to look at your personality. You have to look at what you feel you offer, the blogosphere or the vlogosphere or whatever you want to call it. You have to take a long look at those spaces and see what you have to offer them. Some people don't do well on certain platforms. And some people should really just be models. And that's what they are. And for some people, it's just acting. And I've said this to you guys over and over and over again. You have to start to dissect these things. So in sponsorship, in getting sponsored and how to be sponsored, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. So you have to tackle your approach. You have to tackle your model. You have to tackle what's going to fit for you and where you want to start. Whether it's fishing, hunting, shooting, fitness, whatever it is. Start with what you're most comfortable with. And everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to be different. Not everybody's going to be the same. There's a reason there's YouTube stars. There's a reason there's IG stars. There's a reason for all of them. What companies look for is consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Are you consistent? Do you consistently deliver on your deliverables? Because everybody talks, especially in these industries, about who's delivering and who's good and who will live up to the expectation and how that all shakes out. You have to consistently deliver, and it's a lot of work to create those deliverable scenarios. So you have to live up to that expectation. If you don't live up to that expectation, companies will know very quickly, because everybody chats. Oh, did you hear about this one? You hear about that one? Well, this one's good. Does that mean you can't, or you stand no chance to ever become sponsored if you make a mistake or you have a failure to deliver? No, that's not what that means. It just means you have to develop a pattern of consistency. You're not going to stay successfully in shape if you're not delivering there. So deliver. Deliver. It's important. It's very important. So be consistent. I got a bunch of questions about, always stemming around how you choose. And believe it or not, guys, you may start incredibly small. It can be as small as a local company. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. Start small. You don't have to start big. It doesn't have to be Nike day one. And chances are it's not going to be. You don't have to go there. Start small and practice. I started this podcast. I started these blogs and this website. It's practice. I've been podcasting for now, going back to a podcast I did years ago with Tony Pignato and some of those guys at Shooting USA. I've been podcasting for years. It's all practice. You're going to keep getting better with each episode, with everything, each day. So keep practicing. Keep trying. Don't be afraid to screw it all up a couple times. As far as answering Frenny's questions and changing multiple sponsors, yes, you want to be careful of that. You want to work with brands for a long, long time, if you can help it. I've been fortunate I've worked with a lot of brands for a very long time and still work with them in different capacities. Just because I don't talk about them every day doesn't mean I'm not still working with them. So be as consistent and forthright and sensitive to what those companies look for. I hope some of this helps, and I hope it answered a whole bunch of the questions that I get surrounding sponsorship. And I'm doing some of these standalone episodes around these different topics like YouTube and sponsorship and different things. Now, I will tell you this, and I'll kind of close on this, and I'm going to sign out on IG and come back on. Coming back on. So as far as to kind of wrap this a little bit, you have to be patient with companies. A lot of them, especially in this space, in this social media space, they're just figuring it out. So you have to be patient. Be patient with them. You cannot be somebody who's up there, you know what. You can't. So there's a lot of companies that aren't ready necessarily for social media sponsorship or for brand sponsorship, or don't fully understand everything that's involved with it. So you're going to be educating them a little bit along the way. That's why it's very hard when you sit across the table, and we're seeing a little bit of a transitioning of the guard in this, and Noah could talk about this awesomely. We're seeing a little bit of a transition of the guard in sponsorship and in brand management, to where people are starting to understand and companies are starting to understand it just enough. Just enough. But to an extent, and Noah could talk about this if he came on here, he could talk about it if he came on live. To an extent, companies are just starting to sort it out. Instagram and YouTube are like these mythical islands that it's like, whoa, it's like Atlantis. Like they're just discovering them. So I hope this standalone episode answers a lot of questions and is answering a lot of questions for you guys. And, you know, guys like Noah at Wiseman Company, certain people will give you a very clear understanding. A lot of the conversations we have sometimes with companies are uphill battles. But pretty much when we all walk around SHOT or any show we're at or anywhere, we can look at a company and we can say, they get it. Hey, they get it. That company gets it. Because they're understanding it. You know, I've sat with companies, no word of a lie, and they're like, they still talk about Instagram like it's like this third world country. Yeah, you know, we're looking at that platform. Looking at that platform. It's been around forever. It's an uphill battle with some people, with some brands. It's going to take time. So you have to kind of be patient, be willing to educate, and be willing to adapt. My suggestion is don't go there. That's an arena, I would say, myself, and like there's certain things that are more advanced arenas, and those are arenas that I tackle on a consulting basis, trying to explain the benefits. And then you get some of these companies that think social media should be free. It should be free. Well, they're free. Well, they're not free. Not anymore. Not by any stretch. You're going to have to make an investment in them just like you'll have to make an investment in yourself. So understanding all these things, guys, hopefully answers a ton of questions. It hopefully gives you a ton of insight. And I hope that as a standalone episode, this episode, which is airing right now on YouTube, will be up on my iTunes and on Podbean. I hope it gives you some grasp. And I hope it answered a lot of the questions. And I hope these standalones are good for you guys, because I want to answer a lot of the questions that I get in this form, because I feel it's the best way to deliver you the most information. Because I get DMs about it, and I get a la carte DMs. And I used to get hit up all the time. I still get hit up all the time with all the brands that I'm involved in. Hey, I want to work with you. I want to work with this brand. I want to work with that brand. Well, it's not easy to work with all these different brands. And it's not easy to work with even one brand, let alone 4, let alone 5, let alone 8. So managing those relationships and those expectations becomes a call of duty in itself. And it does become a job really quickly. So when you're following your favorite social media personality, YouTube personality, whatever it is, person you interact with or enjoy paying attention to, understand something. They're putting a lot of effort, time, and energy into developing that brand that you see. Some people choose their name. Some people like Mikey Cunningham choose No Donuts Here. Some people like Tony choose Real World Tactical. Those are their brands. I think it's important. Yep, everyone has a different expectation timeline. Brass and Bullets is another one that can talk about this. So we've spent 50 minutes talking about sponsorship. I'll take any questions. I'll let any friends on the live. I'll let anybody in that wants to talk about it or has a question about it, or potentially is seeking sponsorship and has questions. But I will tell you this. You got to be patient. You got to build it out, and it's going to take time. So whether you want to DM those questions, you ever want to hop on and talk about it when we have kind of an open segment, whatever it is, I'm more than willing to do my best to answer them. And getting into selection of how people choose personalities and what companies are looking for, those are all questions you have to ask yourself. And you have to put back on yourself. My biggest suggestion in sponsorship, what's up, Semiotic Kid, and how to answer sponsorship. It's true. Brass and Bullets says the bottom line is, what can you do for them? But my biggest one is, don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole. Don't try to be something you're not. You don't see me going out and endorsing bowling products. It doesn't fit. You don't try to be something that doesn't fit your brand and what you are. And as you get further along, your brand will be more and more defined. Don't try to fit something in that does not fit and does not make sense. It won't work. And it'll look forced. So Brass, you're welcome to come on anytime and talk about this. You'd be a great authority to have on. But it's definitely no problem, Tiara Tactical. Yeah, everything's great, Semi-Auto Kid. We conquered the whole subject of sponsorship. We talked about sponsorship. I had Dan Frenny on. I had him give some insight, talking about all those different things that stem from sponsorship. It's just a question I get asked over and over again on DM and in different forums, so I try to answer them. So, Brass, maybe we'll get you on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, one of these nights. So hopefully everybody gains some insight. If you have questions, send them in DM. We'll do a follow-up. If you have any statements, I'll try to get them read. Head over to YouTube. This will be a great one. Head over to YouTube. Please tap thumbs up and share. Head over to iTunes or Podbean. Download and leave a review. I would greatly appreciate it. Everybody out there, thank you to the sponsors. Riton Optics, Kenzies Optics, Crossbreed Holsters, and of course, Taurus USA. Thank you to all the sponsors. Please take a moment to thank the sponsors. Head over to my last post, comment and tag, leave a little something. Let me know you were in here. And hopefully this answered a lot of questions for you guys, and hopefully this tackled a lot of the questions you guys have. If I have time later, maybe I'll hop on and I'll do a little follow-up, an impromptu. You know, maybe just for the IG guys or whatever. But hopefully this answered a lot of the questions we get. I know Brass gets them. I get them. I know Noah, who was in here from Wiseman Company, gets them. We all get inundated with all these questions. So hopefully this tackled a lot of that. So I appreciate you guys. I thank you guys for your time. And to everyone who's downloaded, I appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. And I appreciate everybody. Let's sign off here. Thank you to everybody. And we are going to be out.